You're mid-conversation, smiling, nodding, certain you're present, until later when you replay the moment and realize you were on autopilot the entire time. It's strange, isn't it? How you can live days, months, even years, repeating decisions that don't feel fully yours. Science whispers that up to 95% of what you call choice happens before awareness ever lights up. Beneath every thought, a hidden network moves first, deciding, reacting, steering. This is the life that feels like yours but isn't. Yet the instant you start noticing the invisible hand guiding you, the story begins to shift. It happens in less than a heartbeat. Your hand reaches for your phone before you even register the impulse. You open the same app, scroll the same feed, and a faint sense of déjà vu wraps around you. You didn't decide to do it. You simply arrived there. This is the moment your autopilot takes command, smooth and silent, steering the ship of your attention through a familiar route while you believe you're holding the wheel. Every action you perform without conscious thought carries a hidden signature, tiny electrical patterns that precede awareness. Neuroscientists call them readiness potentials. They appear milliseconds before your mind says, "I'm going to move." The truth is unsettling. By the time you think you've chosen, your body already acted on behalf of an older instruction buried deep in your neural maps. You're often the observer, not the author, of what unfolds. Imagine your consciousness as the captain of a vast vessel crossing an invisible ocean. The waters look calm, but below the surface, ancient currents pull with force. Those currents are your stored experiences, every reward, fear, and repetition that ever proved safe. When a familiar wind rises, a tone of voice, a phrase, a smell, the ship instantly turns, following a route your conscious self didn't chart. You call it instinct or habit. In truth, it's pre-programmed navigation responding to coordinates set years ago. There's no malice in this system. It's efficiency. The brain conserves energy by automating whatever it can: speech patterns, walking, emotional responses, even your taste in people. But that same efficiency becomes a prison when the patterns no longer fit who you are. You react to today with the reflexes of a younger version of yourself. The body fires, the emotion surges, and the conscious mind rationalizes afterward. I just felt like it. You can test this phenomenon in real time. The next time someone interrupts you, notice the fraction of a second before words form. Feel that surge rising in your chest, the microsecond where your pulse quickens and your muscles tense. That's the autopilot booting up. It's already predicting what kind of threat this moment represents, comparing it to thousands of past interactions. By the time you reply, the unconscious has already chosen the tone, the posture, the distance between you and the other person. You think you spoke freely. You actually executed an ancient script. There's a subtle irony here. The more confident you are that you're acting consciously, the stronger your unconscious control tends to be. Certainty dulls observation. That's why people who claim to know themselves often repeat the same emotional loops they've stopped watching. Awareness requires friction, the slight discomfort of seeing yourself as process, not as identity. Consider how pilots train to override automatic reflexes. In turbulence, instinct tells them to pull the nose up. Training teaches them to resist. Consciousness for you works the same way. It's a slow hand steadying the controls, while every cell screams for the old maneuver. But this resistance, the moment you feel the impulse and don't obey, is where the pattern first loosens. You might ask, if the unconscious moves first, is free will an illusion? Not exactly. The conscious mind can't always prevent the first impulse, but it can shape the second. It's in the half-second delay, the pause before action, that new neural paths can form. That pause is your true field of freedom. It's where biology and awareness meet, and where reprogramming begins. Stay with this for a moment. How many of your spontaneous choices today were actually rehearsed? The snack you reached for, the tone you used, the direction of your thoughts when you were tired, all quietly orchestrated by an invisible system built for survival, not fulfillment. And yet, if you can start noticing that instant, the one where behavior happens to you, you've already created a split in the automatic loop. Light enters through that crack, and from that small awareness another question begins to rise, Not about what you did, but where your decisions truly come from. Because long before your hand moved, long before thought appeared, something deeper had already decided. Long before you say yes or no, a silent decision has already been made within you. Not in the clear light of awareness, but in the hidden circuitry beneath it, an invisible geography of impulses, memories, and micro-signals that quietly steer your hand, your tone, your direction. By the time you feel the urge to choose, that urge is already old. Science first caught a glimpse of this hidden timing in the 1980s, when researchers measured tiny electrical ripples, readiness potentials, in the brain seconds before a person consciously decided to move. Those experiments have been repeated, refined, and deepened, and the results remain startling. Neural activity predicting your choice appears up to 7 seconds before you register the intention. 7 seconds. That's an eternity in the language of neurons. So where then does your decision actually begin? Imagine a vast map spread out beneath your awareness. Each region corresponds to a network of associations, smells tied to emotions, words linked to memories, gestures that once brought safety or pain. Every experience you've ever had leaves a small mark on that map. When a new situation appears, your brain doesn't start from zero. It consults this internal cartography and chooses the safest route long before consciousness arrives at the scene. You call it preference, intuition, or habit. But underneath, it's a statistical process, the body forecasting survival. If you watch yourself closely, you can sense this pre-conscious choreography. There's the faint tightening of your jaw before you decide to stay quiet, the subtle lean towards someone before you realize you trust them. These are not accidents. They're signals from an ancient intelligence built to keep you safe from uncertainty. Yet that same intelligence can also keep you small, repeating familiar paths because they once worked. The map doesn't update automatically. It only redraws itself when attention meets discomfort. Here's something worth trying. The next time you catch yourself mid-choice, hand hovering over an option, heart leaning one way, pause. Ask, where did this come from? Not as an intellectual exercise, but as a felt inquiry. Does the impulse carry warmth or tension? Is it rooted in curiosity or fear? That distinction reveals whether the signal originates from present awareness or from archived conditioning. The invisible becomes visible only through sensation, not analysis. There's also a kind of bias built into this system, a survival logic that favors what's predictable over what's true. Your unconscious prefers the familiar pain to the unknown peace. It reads known discomfort as safety because, in evolutionary terms, survival always outranked joy. That's why people keep returning to the same jobs, relationships, or emotional climates, even when they no longer fit. The invisible origin of their choices is not rational. It's ancestral, encoded in the chemistry of threat and relief. Notice how this plays out in subtle ways. You hesitate to speak your mind during a meeting. On the surface, it's professionalism. Beneath, it's a stored reflex from childhood, the memory of being corrected too harshly. The decision not to speak wasn't born in that room. It's the echo of another moment entirely. The body remembered, and the mind simply followed the safest script available. This is why awareness feels like reclaiming lost territory. Each moment of observation redraws the map. When you witness the unconscious mechanism, catch it in the act, it loses a fraction of its power. You begin to sense a delay, a gap between the impulse and the act where something new could happen. That gap is the frontier where free will quietly begins to exist. But be careful not to turn this into a war between conscious and unconscious. They're not enemies, they're coordinates of the same system. The conscious mind is like a torch, illuminating tiny parts of a vast landscape that's always been there. The unconscious provides the terrain, the valleys of habit, the ridges of fear, the paths of attraction. You don't conquer it, you learn to navigate with it, like a sailor reading invisible currents beneath a calm sea. And as you begin to see how every choice originates before you think, something deeper becomes clear. What you call your will might actually be a dance between awareness and automaticity, a collaboration, not a command. Yet beneath that realization lies a more mysterious layer still. Because if your choices emerge from an unseen origin, then the question naturally unfolds. What else within you has been silently shaping the path you walk, long before thought ever arrives? It usually starts with a single sentence, a phrase spoken carelessly in childhood, maybe by someone who meant well, maybe by someone who didn't. You're too sensitive. You'll never be as good as your brother. Money doesn't come easy. Small sentences that sound harmless at the time, but the unconscious doesn't treat them as words. It treats them as laws. And once written into its architecture, they harden like metal, shaping the form your life can take. Think of the mind as a forge. Each belief is a small piece of molten metal hammered into shape by repetition and emotion. The more often an idea is felt, not just thought, the stronger its form becomes. Eventually it cools, solidifies, and disappears from view, just another invisible structure, supporting how you move, love, and decide. But if you listen closely, you can still hear the echo of the hammer that forged it. Beliefs like these don't declare themselves. They whisper through patterns. You might call them just the way I am. You stay quiet when you have something valuable to say. You over-prepare for every task because mistakes are dangerous. You hold back affection because people leave when you care too much. These are not conscious positions, they are safety codes designed long ago to keep you from emotional harm. And like any good protection system, they keep doing their job long after the threat has passed. The paradox is that the unconscious mind doesn't distinguish between protection and limitation. It's loyal to what once kept you safe, even if it now keeps you small. The sentence, "Don't draw attention to yourself," might have shielded you from embarrassment at 7 years old, but at 40 it becomes a cage around your visibility, a filter over your voice. The same belief that once prevented pain now prevents expansion. You can test this mechanism by noticing how you justify your own limits. When you say, "I'm just not good with people," or "That's not my kind of opportunity," what emotion sits underneath? Fear, tension, or calm? The body always knows. Beliefs live in muscle and breath long before they live in words. They shape posture, tone, and even perception. If you carry the belief that "I'm not enough," the world mirrors that shape back to you. People seem distant, recognition rare, success fleeting. Not because reality changed, but because your attention has been trained to filter only what confirms the old sentence. Here's where neuroscience adds something powerful. The brain is plastic, not permanent. The circuits that hold a belief can be rewired through new emotional experiences, repeated with intention. But the key isn't to fight the old sentence, it's to observe it without judgment, to let it reveal the function it once served. When you see that it was a form of care, your mind's attempt to protect you, the prison door begins to loosen on its hinges. Compassion melts what resistance cannot. I remember working with someone who carried the belief, "If I rest, I'll fall behind." It began when she was praised as a child for being the responsible one. Her nervous system equated stillness with danger. Even on vacation, her body stayed in a quiet panic. When she finally traced that belief to its origin, not as a thought, but as a physical pattern, something softened. She began testing small acts of rest, 5 minutes of silence after work, a walk without a goal. Within weeks, her body learned that rest didn't equal failure. A new neural path began to form, fragile at first, then firm. You may think these examples are rare, but they're everywhere. Every automatic no to joy, every quick retreat from opportunity carries a sentence behind it. These sentences are not fate, they're architecture waiting to be redesigned. But redesign begins with awareness, because you cannot reforge metal you refuse to see. Start listening for the beliefs that feel true but never questioned. They reveal themselves through tension, the breath that shortens when someone compliments you, the unease when things go well. Those are signs of an internal structure built around survival, not freedom. And as you trace these hidden frameworks, you'll start to sense that something deeper than words is guiding them. An older intelligence that believes it's protecting you from harm. But what happens when that ancient protector mistakes growth for danger? You like to think you're the one making the moves. You plan, you decide, you choose. But deep down, a quiet contradiction stirs. How much of what you call control is simply choreography performed by parts of you that never asked for permission? Imagine for a moment that your life is a grand stage. The spotlight follows you, you deliver your lines, and the audience applauds your confidence. But behind the curtain there's a crew you never see. Lighting engineers, stagehands, a director who keeps whispering cues through an earpiece you forgot you were wearing. You hear your voice echo through the theater, and it sounds like free will, yet every movement is already mapped in advance, rehearsed in the shadows of your unconscious mind. The danger isn't that this hidden crew exists, it's that you've mistaken yourself for the only actor on stage. The illusion of control is seductive. It keeps the ego comfortable. It allows you to feel certain even when the deeper layers of your mind are steering in another direction. And so, when life doesn't go according to plan, when relationships repeat the same patterns, when success feels hollow, when peace remains just out of reach, you blame fate, luck, or other people. Rarely do you suspect that the director you've been arguing with is living inside you. Here's the paradox. Believing you're fully in control actually makes you less conscious, because once you're convinced you already know what's happening, you stop observing. You miss the micro-signals, the tightening of the body, the shift in breathing, the inner resistance that precedes an old reaction. In psychological terms, this is called cognitive closure, the brain's preference for certainty over truth. It would rather feel right than be aware. And that craving for control becomes the very mechanism that keeps you trapped in the unconscious loop. You can sense this tension in everyday life. You set an intention to stay calm today, but someone cuts in line and a flash of irritation bursts through you before you can blink. You tell yourself you're choosing patience, yet the nervous system has already deployed the emotion. You're left narrating an experience that's already happened, pretending the narration is authorship. It's like watching lightning and then claiming you created the thunder. What makes this dynamic dangerous isn't the loss of control itself, it's the blindness that comes with the illusion. When you believe you're the one deciding, you don't question the deeper motives behind your actions. You don't notice that the choice to help someone might be driven by a hidden fear of rejection, or that your pursuit of success might be fueled by an unconscious hunger for approval. You call these decisions rational, but they're often emotional negotiations disguised as logic. Now here's the inner debate that lives inside everyone. One voice insists, I must stay in control, otherwise everything will fall apart. Another whispers, but maybe control is what's preventing me from actually living. You stand between these two, torn between safety and surrender. The first voice belongs to the ego. It fears chaos, it clings to predictability. The second comes from awareness. It doesn't seek to dominate life, only to witness it without distortion. You might think surrender means weakness, but in truth, it's the beginning of precision. Because when you stop pretending to control everything, your perception sharpens. You start to see how the unconscious moves before thought appears, how emotion colors perception, how choice emerges from patterns rather than pure intention. The observer becomes separate from the actor, and that distance grants clarity. In neuroscience, this shift is reflected in something subtle. When people practice mindful observation, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain associated with awareness and regulation, begins to override habitual emotional circuits in the amygdala. It's not about suppressing emotion, but about noticing it before it takes command. Awareness replaces the illusion of control with something far more powerful: participation. Think of it like sailing rather than steering. Control is trying to force the wind. Awareness is learning to read it. The wind doesn't obey you, but if you understand its direction, you can move with elegance through the chaos. And as this understanding deepens, another question begins to surface beneath the illusion. If you are not fully in control, then who or what is truly steering the ship when the same patterns keep repeating, no matter how much you try to change? You tell yourself this time it will be different. The person is different, the job is new, the city has changed. Yet a few months later, you find yourself in the same emotional landscape, wearing a new disguise. Different faces, same feeling. It's as if life keeps looping until you finally notice the pattern hidden beneath the story. Repetition isn't punishment, it's communication. The unconscious doesn't speak in words, it speaks in echoes. Every pattern that returns carries a message you refuse to hear the first time. When you ignore it, it doesn't vanish. It simply finds a new stage, a new actor, a new scenario to replay the same emotional film. The universe doesn't repeat itself to annoy you, it repeats itself to reveal you. Picture it like standing in a hall of mirrors. You walk from one reflection to another, convinced each is a new beginning, until you realize the angles are different, but the expression staring back is the same. That moment, the recognition of the recurring reflection, isn't failure. It's awakening. It means the unconscious pattern has finally been seen, and what is seen can begin to dissolve. Maybe your pattern shows up in relationships, the same distance, the same argument, the same ending cloaked in different words. Or maybe it's in work, overextending yourself, burning out, feeling unseen, promising you'll do it differently next time. These are not coincidences. They are psychic constellations orbiting an unacknowledged truth, something inside you still trying to protect an old wound by recreating the conditions that first caused it. The logic is primitive but loyal. If I relive it, maybe I can fix it this time. But repetition never heals through reenactment. It heals through recognition. The unconscious keeps casting the same play until the conscious mind enters the audience and finally watches instead of performing. Once you start watching, the script begins to lose its hold. You can feel this shift somatically. When a familiar situation arises, your body recognizes it before your mind does. A tightening in the chest, a familiar drop in the stomach, a voice whispering, "Here we go again." That physical echo is your cue, not a signal to resist, but to observe. The pattern is surfacing not to trap you, but to show you the doorway you've always avoided walking through. The repetition carries intelligence. It reappears precisely at the point of unfinished integration, where emotion was once too overwhelming to process, so the system archived it. That's why the same kinds of people, situations, or emotions keep orbiting your life. Your nervous system is still trying to complete a conversation that never ended. Every return is an invitation to listen differently this time. Awareness breaks the spell. When you stop blaming the world for recycling the same story and start tracking how you move inside it, something shifts. You see that you're both the author and the character, both the seeker and the scenery. From that vantage point, you don't need to destroy the pattern, you need to understand it. Because what was once a prison becomes a compass. It points precisely to the area of yourself that's ready to evolve. Think of it like a melody that won't leave your head. It plays on repeat not to irritate you, but to be completed, to resolve the note that was left hanging. Once you sing the missing tone, the loop quiets down on its own. The same happens internally. When the feeling is finally felt, when the memory is finally witnessed instead of avoided, the unconscious no longer needs to stage the scene again. If you look closely, your repeating pattern isn't a curse, it's a coded request for awareness. That's your own life asking, "Will you see me this time?" And if something in you recognizes that truth right now, if there's a loop you've been tired of living but never quite understood, pause here, breathe, let that recognition settle in your body. Then, as a small act of witnessing, write it down. Name the pattern that keeps returning. If this reflection landed somewhere real for you, acknowledge it publicly. Not for me, but for you. Leave a comment below with the words, "I see the pattern." It's not a declaration of defeat, it's a declaration of sight. Because awareness is how every unconscious cycle begins to unwind. Before a single thought appears, your body has already delivered its verdict. The pulse quickens, the breath changes, the muscles contract or soften. These are not side effects of emotion. They are the emotion, translated into language your mind learns to interpret a fraction of a second later. You believe you're responding consciously, but in truth you're decoding what your body has already said. If you could slow perception down to microseconds, you'd see this choreography unfold with mathematical precision. First, the nervous system scans the environment through what neuroscientists call neuroception, an unconscious process that detects safety or danger before the cortex gets involved. Next, a cascade of physiological adjustments occurs. Hormones shift, heart rate adapts, tiny facial muscles respond. Only after this symphony begins does awareness light up and translate the sensations into thoughts. By then, the mind is already composing the story. I'm nervous because of the meeting, or I'm angry because he interrupted me. But those thoughts are the subtitles, not the script. The body is the original instrument of perception. It vibrates before the mind interprets. Like a tuning fork, it resonates with every stimulus it encounters. Another person's tone, the temperature of a room, even the subtle field of attention between two people. You often mistake these signals for intuition or mood, but they're actually physiological data, messages from the deeper intelligence that keeps you alive. Try to remember the last time you met someone and immediately felt at ease, or conversely, slightly uneasy without knowing why. That impression arrived through the body, not the intellect. Your nervous system registered micro-expressions, posture, and rhythm long before you processed any words. The mind later created reasons to explain the feeling, but the decision, the sense of safety or threat, had already been made. Most people spend their lives ignoring these micro-messages because modern awareness is trained to trust cognition over sensation. We call it being rational, as if the body were primitive and the mind evolved. But evolution tells a different story. The body is the mind, extended into form. Every cell carries receptors that read the world and communicate upward through an electrical network far faster than conscious reasoning. To live disconnected from that system is to navigate reality half-blind. Watch how your body speaks in real time. Before you answer a difficult question, notice the tiny pause in breath. Before you agree to something you don't want, notice how your throat tightens, how your shoulders subtly rise. The body doesn't lie. It broadcasts coherence or conflict long before words appear. When you ignore that signal, you pay for it later, through exhaustion, anxiety, or the quiet sense that life keeps moving against your will. There's a profound humility in realizing that the body knows first. It dismantles the illusion that the mind sits at the top of command. You begin to see that awareness is not about control but attunement, listening to the subtle language of movement, temperature, and rhythm that the unconscious uses to communicate. Awareness doesn't speak over the body. It learns to translate. You can test this directly. Choose a decision you've been avoiding. Before thinking it through, bring your attention to the lower abdomen, the chest, the hands. Ask silently, what do you already know? Wait for a shift, a warmth, a contraction, a small pull in one direction. That's the body answering, often without words. It doesn't offer explanations, it offers resonance. The more you practice listening, the more precise that resonance becomes. In scientific language, this is coherence, the synchronization between heart, breath, and brain rhythms that allows perception to clarify. When your system is coherent, intuition feels calm and grounded. When it's incoherent, thought becomes reactive and scattered. The difference isn't mystical, it's measurable, but it requires stillness, and stillness threatens the parts of you that rely on mental noise to stay in control. As you start tuning into these signals, a strange thing happens. Memory becomes physical. The body remembers every place it felt unseen, every moment it tightened to survive. Those memories don't fade with time. They store as tension, posture, and chronic gestures. They wait patiently to be recognized, not through analysis but through presence. And this is where the deeper revelation begins to unfold, because once you start hearing the language of the body, you realize it's been trying to tell you something for years, not only about emotion or instinct, but about the very point where the unconscious system starts to fail, when repetition no longer protects you, but begins to suffocate you. There comes a point when the system stops working. You don't always notice it right away, because for years the unconscious has done a perfect job of holding everything together. It manages routines, relationships, and even pain with silent efficiency. It predicts danger, avoids risk, repeats what feels familiar. But then one day you wake up and the machinery grinds against itself. The gears that once turned smoothly begin to slip. Something deep within no longer believes in the script it's been following. It can happen quietly. You're driving to work. doing what you've done 1,000 times before, and suddenly a strange emptiness floods in. The scenery looks the same, but meaning has evaporated from it. Or it comes violently. A breakup, an illness, the loss of something that anchored your identity. Either way, the moment feels like malfunction. The old reflexes don't produce the same results. The unconscious, built to protect you, no longer knows how to interpret reality as safe. That's the moment the unconscious fails. When its ancient algorithms avoid pain, seek safety, repeat what once worked, can no longer generate coherence. What used to keep you intact now keeps you disconnected. You feel it as fatigue, confusion, or the quiet question no one wants to face. Why doesn't anything feel real anymore? I once met someone who described it perfectly. "It's like my life is running, but I'm not inside it," she said. She wasn't depressed in the clinical sense. She was disoriented. Her old strategies for control, pleasing others, staying busy, suppressing discomfort, had stopped producing the illusion of stability. Her unconscious template had collapsed, and without it, she didn't yet know who she was. It wasn't a breakdown. It was exposure. The hidden machinery had been revealed, and now it demanded reassembly with awareness. The failure of the unconscious is not the enemy. It's the first honest signal that evolution is trying to happen. The system collapses only when it's too small to hold who you've become. The habits, beliefs, and identities that once kept you safe now restrict movement. The body senses this first. Exhaustion replaces alertness. The pulse of purpose fades. It's as if the compass inside loses its magnetic north, not because direction vanished, but because the old polarity no longer points to truth. When this happens, the mind's instinct is to panic. It scrambles for the next structure, new goals, new people, new distractions, to restore the illusion of control. But if you can resist that impulse, if you can stay inside the disorientation without rushing to fix it, something remarkable begins. Beneath the noise, a new rhythm starts to pulse. The body, freed from rehearsed responses, starts listening again. Sensation sharpens, time stretches. The unconscious isn't destroyed, it's rebooting. This in-between state, where the old programs fail but the new ones haven't formed yet, is uncomfortable, even terrifying. It's the raw gap between identities. Yet it's also the birthplace of conscious choice. For the first time, you're not reacting automatically. You're forced to notice what is. You can see how much of your life was built on survival codes, how many of your decisions were maintenance scripts designed to keep the illusion intact. Now, without those scripts, you stand in open space. Biologically, this moment mirrors what neuroscientists observe when neural pathways weaken before new ones solidify. The brain enters a window of plasticity, a temporary instability where the old networks dissolve, making room for new connections. That instability feels like failure, but it's the nervous system preparing to rewrite its map. The same thing happens psychologically. When the unconscious can't predict anymore, consciousness expands to take over. You begin to see what used to move you from within. If you listen carefully during this phase, you'll notice subtle transitions. The pauses between impulses grow longer. The compulsion to explain or fix starts to fade. Emotions no longer arrive as storms but as data, each one revealing where the old protection strategy still lingers. What felt like falling apart is, in truth, integration in progress. The unconscious fails not because it's broken, but because it has reached the edge of its old territory. It can no longer protect you from growth. And in that failure, when certainty dissolves and the compass spins, you begin to sense something unexpected. A quiet intelligence underneath the collapse, as if life itself were inviting you to see that the system was never your enemy, only a map drawn for a smaller version of who you were. And once you recognize that invitation, another realization slowly starts to emerge, one that changes the entire relationship between you and the hidden parts within. The unconscious was never trying to destroy you. It's been trying, in its clumsy way, to keep you safe all along. It's easy to think of the unconscious as a hidden adversary, some secret puppeteer undermining your best intentions. You blame it for sabotaging relationships, repeating mistakes, reacting without reason. For most of your life, it seemed like an invisible enemy operating behind your back. But then comes the revelation no one expects. The unconscious was never against you. It's not cruel, careless, or broken. It's a clumsy protector, an outdated guardian still guarding a version of you that no longer exists. Every automatic behavior you've ever wanted to change, every reflex, every self-sabotage, every instinct that seemed to pull you backward, was once designed to keep you alive. When you were too young to reason, your nervous system learned through feeling. It stored every shock, every silence, every rejection as a commandment about how to survive. The belief that love must be earned, that safety depends on control, that being quiet avoids pain. All of these were brilliant solutions at the time. The unconscious did what consciousness couldn't. It built a protective shell to keep your system coherent in a chaotic world. But the problem is that protection, once encoded, never updates on its own. The unconscious doesn't know the difference between then and now. It replays the old instructions as if the original threat were still alive. You're 40, but your body still braces like you're 7. You're in a stable home, but your breath shortens as if someone might raise their voice at any moment. The system means well. It's still trying to keep you safe. It just hasn't realized that you outgrew the danger. That's the revelation. The unconscious isn't malicious, it's loyal, painfully loyal. It's been working overtime to protect you from the echoes of past pain, even if it costs you joy, intimacy, or expansion. It doesn't sabotage your relationships because it hates love. It does so because it equates love with the risk of loss. It doesn't keep you overworking because it craves exhaustion. It does so because rest once meant vulnerability. The unconscious only knows how to repeat what once prevented pain. When you start to see it this way, something inside you softens. The old reflexes lose their villainous edge. You stop fighting the part of you that flinches, freezes, or hides. You realize that what you've been calling resistance is actually devotion, a form of love expressed in outdated language. And love, once recognized, can finally evolve. There's a point when this insight becomes physical. You notice that instead of forcing yourself to overcome patterns, you begin to listen to them. The tension in your shoulders stops being an enemy to fix and becomes a message. Something inside still doesn't feel safe. The anxiety before speaking up isn't weakness. It's your nervous system asking, will it be different this time? When you respond with presence instead of judgment, the old circuitry starts to rewire itself. Safety, once external, becomes internal. It's not an intellectual shift, it's biological reconciliation. Your cells, accustomed to bracing for life, begin to relax into it. The unconscious starts to receive new data, experiences of safety, connection, and trust. Bit by bit, the old map, drawn in the terrain of fear, gets redrafted. You are no longer the child navigating chaos, you are the cartographer of a new internal world. This process doesn't erase the unconscious, it transforms the relationship between you and it. The mind becomes less of a commander and more of a translator, teaching the deeper layers of your system that the present is not the past. In that conversation, compassion becomes the new programming language. And there's a quiet beauty in realizing that nothing inside you was ever trying to destroy you. Every protective reflex, every loop, every failure was an act of misdirected care. The unconscious was simply using the only instructions it had. When you meet that truth without resistance, the tension between who you were and who you are begins to dissolve. You start to sense that what was once the problem might actually be the pathway, the exact mechanism through which growth becomes possible. And if you stay open long enough to that realization, another mystery starts to surface, one that links emotion, energy, and the invisible field you project even before you think. Because once the unconscious begins to soften, your entire frequency shifts, and the world feels your change before you've even said a word. Long before you speak, you're already communicating. Long before you decide, the world around you has already felt your decision. Your body emits more than heat and motion, it radiates information. Every micro-adjustment in your breath, every pulse of your heartbeat, every electrical charge that travels through your cells becomes part of the energetic field you project. You don't have to believe in mysticism to see it. Physics and physiology are already showing what spirituality has whispered for centuries. You are broadcasting constantly, even when you think you're silent. Researchers studying bioelectromagnetism have found that the human heart generates an electromagnetic field measurable several feet beyond the body. It fluctuates with emotion, coherence, and intent. When you feel gratitude, the field becomes harmonious. When you feel fear, it fragments. Your brain does the same, firing electrical patterns that ripple through tissue and space. These microsignals form a kind of living signature, an energetic fingerprint of your current state of being. People around you may not consciously detect it, but their nervous systems respond to it instantly. That's why you can walk into a room and feel tension before anyone speaks, or sense peace near someone whose presence feels grounded. The unconscious plays a crucial role in this invisible broadcast. It's not just shaping your behaviors, it's setting the tone of your field. If your inner system is driven by suppressed anxiety, that vibration becomes the frequency you emit. Your words might sound calm, but something beneath them tells a different story. Energy coherence, or lack of it, cannot be faked. The unconscious always leaks through. Think about the last time you met someone who said all the right things, yet something in you felt uneasy. It wasn't their logic that repelled you, it was their signal. The mismatch between their surface and their field registered as incoherence. The same dynamic happens inside you. When your thoughts and emotions are out of sync, your own energy betrays you. It's not punishment, it's physics. Every incoherent state sends contradictory messages into your environment, and the world responds in kind, mirroring that confusion back to you through circumstance and reaction. Your body is in many ways an antenna. Every cell oscillates at microscopic frequencies, syncing and desyncing based on emotion and attention. When you dwell in anger, fear, or shame, the signal becomes jagged. When you access curiosity, compassion, or calm focus, the signal smooths. These waves influence the quantum-level communication that constantly occurs between living systems, an unbroken dialogue of resonance. You could call it intuition or entanglement or simply sensitivity, but the effect is the same. You're both transmitting and receiving reality at once. You can sense this phenomenon directly if you slow down enough to feel it. When you walk into a space filled with anxiety, notice how your breathing subtly changes, how your muscles tighten without instruction. That's your field syncing with the environment. Conversely, when you meet someone who is deeply coherent, present, steady, you find yourself exhaling more easily, even before words are exchanged. The unconscious mind recognizes harmony and moves toward it instinctively. Here's what most people overlook. Your energetic signature isn't created by what you think about yourself, but by what you believe beneath the surface. The phrase, "I'm fine," carries no power if your nervous system is vibrating in defense. The world doesn't respond to your language, it responds to your coherence, and coherence isn't built through effort, it arises when your inner state stops fighting itself. When thought, emotion, and physiology align, energy becomes ordered, and that order radiates outward as calm influence. There's a subtle, humbling truth in realizing this. Every time you step into the world, you're revealing your inner state, whether you mean to or not. Your field tells on you, the nervous tension, the withheld truth, the unacknowledged grief. But it also reveals your evolution, the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to control perception, the softness of one who has made peace with uncertainty. People don't just see you, they feel the update. Energy coherence is the physical translation of integrity. It's not about perfection or positivity. It's about congruence, when the mind stops pretending and the body stops bracing. In that moment, you become transparent in the best possible way. Nothing to prove, nothing to hide. The field around you stabilizes, and others feel it as clarity, safety, even warmth. And this is where a deeper understanding starts to surface. If your energy is already communicating who you are before you act or speak, then the work of transformation isn't about controlling appearances. It's about retraining the unconscious to hold a new pattern, to learn a new way of being that naturally radiates coherence. Because the moment your field changes, reality begins to rearrange around it. You've spent years trying to control the unconscious, as if it were an unruly force that needed to be tamed. You've analyzed, resisted, even spiritualized it. But the paradox is that control was never the key. Control belongs to the surface mind, and the unconscious doesn't speak that language. It doesn't respond to logic or argument. It learns by observation, by repetition, by pattern. The real transformation begins not when you fight the unconscious, but when you begin to teach it, patiently, the way you would teach a child how to walk again on steady ground. The key you never looked for isn't hidden in complexity, it's hidden in consistency. The unconscious learns from what you do, not what you intend. Every small act of coherence becomes a new line of code written into the deeper system. You don't reprogram it through dramatic breakthroughs or intellectual insight. You reprogram it through gentle, repeated alignment, when thought, emotion, and behavior start to echo the same frequency long enough for the body to believe it's safe to change. Think of your unconscious as fertile soil that has simply been seeded with the wrong instructions. For decades, you've been watering certain plants without realizing it. Habits of fear, scarcity, and self-doubt. They grew strong because you gave them attention. But soil doesn't discriminate between what grows. It responds to whatever is planted and nourished. Once you understand that, everything shifts. You don't need to destroy the old garden. You need to start cultivating a new one, seed by seed, moment by moment, until the landscape of your inner world begins to transform from the ground up. This is where the science of neuroplasticity meets the quiet art of awareness. Each time you choose to respond differently, to breathe before reacting, to notice tension before defending, to soften instead of contract, you're firing a new neural pathway. Repetition strengthens it until the old reflex weakens from disuse. The body doesn't change through insight alone, it changes through rehearsal. The unconscious observes your consistent state and begins to mirror it, gradually adopting new definitions of safety and meaning. You can sense this process physically. In the beginning, every new behavior feels unnatural, like writing with your non-dominant hand. The old program protests, the muscles tighten, the mind questions. But repetition carries a quiet authority. The more you repeat a new pattern, grounded, calm, self-trusting, the more the unconscious starts to believe you. That belief isn't conceptual, it's cellular. One morning, without realizing it, you notice that the reaction you've been trying to change simply didn't appear. The pause that once required effort now feels natural. The system has updated. The unconscious doesn't resist truth, it resists inconsistency. It watches what you practice more closely than what you promise. That's why fleeting motivation fails, but daily presence transforms. If every morning you spend 2 minutes feeling gratitude in your body, not as a performance, but as an actual vibration, the unconscious begins to treat gratitude as home base. It learns that peace isn't foreign, that calm doesn't equal danger. Slowly, your baseline frequency rises, and life begins to mirror that shift. It's humbling to realize how simple the key really is. You've been searching for something profound, some hidden door to enlightenment, when the entryway has always been in repetition, the humble act of teaching your system a new language through lived experience. Awareness becomes the instructor, and your daily choices become the lesson plan. And the most extraordinary part is how naturally the unconscious adapts once you stop trying to overpower it. It doesn't need to be convinced, only shown. When you walk differently, breathe differently, speak differently, it follows. It's always learning from the signals you send, moment by moment, micro-decision by micro-decision. Over time, what was once effort becomes identity. This is the quiet miracle of reprogramming. You don't change by forcing the unconscious to obey you. You change by demonstrating what harmony feels like until it remembers. The key you never looked for was never about unlocking a hidden chamber. It was about realizing that the lock itself was designed to open through rhythm, not force. And as that rhythm takes hold, the life that once felt automatic begins to realign with presence. The unconscious no longer drags you backward, it begins to collaborate. And in that subtle collaboration, something even deeper stirs, waiting just beyond awareness. The moment when consciousness finally takes the wheel, not as a controller, but as a co-creator of the life that's truly yours. The moment you realize the unconscious has been steering your life isn't defeat, it's awakening. You see that every reaction, every pattern, every emotion was never meant to imprison you, but to reveal where awareness was missing. Now, the choice is yours. Keep living on autopilot, or begin the slow, deliberate work of teaching your system a new rhythm. Freedom doesn't arrive through control, it arrives through understanding. The life that once felt like yours can finally become yours, because now you're awake enough to guide it. If you've made it here, write, "I'm taking the wheel" in the comments so I know you reached the end. And if this message resonated, watch one of the videos appearing on your screen right now. Each one dives deeper into this same path of awareness, coherence, and conscious creation.